Morning Majority on 630 WMAL.
8:07 on WMAL. This is the Morning Majority. It's Brian Neiman, Brian Wilson, Mary Catherine Ham in the house this morning. We're joined now by Ambassador John Bolton, former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations. Mr. Ambassador, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Glad to be with you.
Hey, listen, when you were ambassador, you were always very blunt. I think a lot of people appreciated that, but at times you have to be a diplomat. I'm wondering if you could talk about the relationship, what it is like right now between President Obama and Benjamin Netanyahu.
Wretched comes to mind. I think it's pretty clear President Obama is the most anti-Israel president we've ever had since the State of Israel was created. He's made that plain in any number of ways. And I think the feeling is reciprocated by the citizens of Israel, where the president has single-digit approval ratings. This latest flap that we've seen play out in the past week, I think, demonstrates the reasons why. I think the president tried to put Prime Minister Netanyahu in a box, in a corner that he couldn't get out of before the Prime Minister arrived. Incredibly, Prime Minister Netanyahu, I think, completely turned things around. I think it's Obama who's in the corner now, as the unbelievable reception that Netanyahu got from Congress the other day demonstrated.
Do you think it's personal at all between President Obama and Netanyahu?
Only in private is my guess. Each in there with their own delegations. I think you've got to be professional and dignified in these exchanges, even when they get tense. And I'm sure that there was very, very less drama than probably people think would be my guess.
Why do you think the timing? I mean, with what's going on in the Arab world right now, the Arab Spring, how unsure everything is, especially in Egypt, which when Mubarak was there, is at least a nation that Israel could count on. Why now do you think the president decided to put the borders on the table?
I'm completely confused by that. I don't think it makes any sense at all. I don't think with the recent coalition announcement by the terrorist group Hamas, Palestinian terrorist group, and Fatah, the leading Palestinian group in the Palestinian government, the prospects for peace negotiations with Israel were functionally zero. So why the president would do this at the time he did, I just can't explain it. I think it must have had something to do with disagreements within the administration. A few weeks before Netanyahu arrived, former Senator George Mitchell resigned as the special envoy. Widely speculated it's because he had advanced a peace plan that was not accepted, and he resigned in protest, in effect. But I find it, especially with 20/20 hindsight, of course, a very foolish political move by the president.
Ambassador Bolton, you're right about that. I mean, one of the things I noticed is that Mitchell got out of Dodge before all this came to light. So it's almost as if he had a heads up, I thought. I'd like to ask you, though, is this an action that he consciously made, or is this just a spectacular lack of understanding on the part of the Obama administration? He's not a man without political skills and a pretty good political antenna, but he seems to, every time he talks about this issue, to step in it big time.
Yeah, well, it just mystifies me. It really does. And I think what happened, especially as people review the reception of the joint meeting of Congress to the Netanyahu speech, it shows how isolated the president is, how ideologically slanted his views of Israel are, and how far out of the mainstream he is, even from his own party. So, it ends up being a completely self-inflicted political wound that even top Democrats were distancing themselves. Harry Reid, Steny Hoyer, getting as far away from the president's position as they could.
Yeah, my baseline on this issue has always been, well, I'm not a Middle East expert, but I'm sort of basically competent. I know that these are issues, and he keeps stepping on all the issues that most of us as politically aware people know.
Well, this is, to me, the indication of just how radical the president's agenda is in the foreign policy arena as well as in the domestic party arena. I don't think this is a Jewish issue or anything else. I think this is an American issue because the security of Israel is intertwined with the security of the United States in many, many respects. So to keep advancing arguments that undercut Israel and that risk America's national security too has to lead you to ask not just, doesn't this man understand the Middle East, but doesn't he understand the requirements for our national security.
Well, and either a lack of information or the radicalism is disturbing, especially when you've got this Arab Spring going on. It's very complex. What's sort of your update on that and your take on that and how the administration is handling it?
Well, I'm very worried about the direction that things are taking in a number of Arab countries. Obviously, we all hope at some point they could be democratic. That's part of our political DNA. But you can be democratic and not be open and free and liberal in the consequence. And I'm worried that some of the extremists will try and take advantage of elections that are being called precipitously early. In Egypt is a good example. And we could end up with democratically elected governments that don't believe in basic freedoms. And in the case of Egypt, where I'm especially worried, you could get a government that's not prepared to uphold the key elements of the Camp David Accords. This is the perfect example of how our national security can be undermined. We wanted the Egyptian-Israeli peace agreement from 1979 to be a foundation of security in the region as a whole. And if that comes unstuck, a major building block for U.S. policy also comes unstuck.
I was surprised in his speech in front of Congress that Benjamin Netanyahu seemed to be so optimistic about the Arab Spring. Did you read that the same way as I did?
Well, I think he's trying to be optimistic in the long-term view, but I think throughout that speech and in other comments he made here in Washington, it's pretty clear he's worried particularly about the implications in Egypt and Jordan, the two countries that have signed peace agreements with Israel, and he's very worried, and understandably so, about Syria and Lebanon, where Iran has such a stranglehold on political developments. And that's why the Netanyahu speech emphasized the Iranian threat so much, both the nuclear weapons program and Iran's support for terrorism. He said more in that speech to Congress about the Iranian threat than Obama has in 2 years in office.
Mr. Ambassador, I've got to turn to the issue of politics. Are you still seriously considering a run for the presidency?
Well, I am, and this past week's developments in the Middle East just underline why I think it's important.
Well, hold on. I hear you say that you are, and I believe that you mean what you say, but I don't see anything going on with you that would indicate you're making the right moves to be a player in the coming election.
Well, that's because I haven't decided to.
But don't you have to sort of, get out there and contact the right people and be in touch with folks and go to Iowa and go to New Hampshire and have a system in place and raise money?
I'm doing a lot of that, but by way of due diligence for what for me will be a very difficult decision. I've never run for public office before, and it's a hard decision to make. But I cling to the old-fashioned notion that words actually should mean what the dictionary says they mean. So when I say I'm considering it, I'm not pretending that I'm considering while I'm actually getting ready. I am considering it. When I make a decision, then I'll take action.
Can you catch up if you decide to go in late?
Yes, I definitely. Look, this whole election cycle has been pushed way to the right for a lot of reasons. I think everything is delayed. I do not believe, leaving me aside, I do not believe the field is set. I think there's still a lot of other people who could come in because self-evidently the party is not coalescing around any front runner. There's enormous desire to beat Obama, but honestly not a lot of enthusiasm for who's already in.
All right, well, we appreciate your firm decision to come on the show this morning. Thank you very much.
It was a hard decision, but I thought about it.
Especially when we found out who was here.
You're welcome anytime. Thank you, Ambassador.